the hardware of the internet is not particularly pretty. There's a handful of really enormous corporations that own all of the pipes, and so if you're really privacy minded, you sort of question, this guy owns the pipe, has he got a stethoscope on the side of it? There are some interesting models for how you could replace the current infrastructure, the pipes, with a new set of pipes that have more sort of human values baked into them. I highly recommend, I hope I've linked it in there, otherwise I'll add it shortly. It's a short documentary called Free the Network, and it's these guys in Occupy Wall Street on this like feverish, eye-popping trip where they've started building a new internet that's community owned and community governed instead of privately owned and privately governed. And so it's really early days, super exciting, but they're starting to sketch out a plan for the technology, but also, which is relatively solved, but the actual economic problem of we have the technology to communicate with each other without using the main pipes. We can set up mesh networks so that we're talking point to point instead of talking to some central point. But economically, it's like, how do you transition from normal internet to this new disintermediated community-owned internet? And they've got some ideas that I think are interesting. So one suggestion they're talking about is that you should have like internet co-ops on every street. So let's say you live on a street and everyone on the street has internet connection and they're paying like $50 a month each to be connected to Vodafone or Telstra or Telecom or whatever. And you get yourselves organised, they get the humans to talk to each other, and they go, how about instead of having 100 people paying $50 each, we just buy one real awesome cable and plug it into this wireless tower for our street? And so then everyone pays like half the amount, and they get to share this one tower instead of having their own connection. And so there's sort of an economic incentive to share a little bit, just this one little bit of internet, but you share it. And then the next street over, if they were to do the same thing and then connected their towers together, then you'd have all of the service would improve for everyone and the price would go down. And so the idea is that you repeat this model until you get a whole suburb and a whole city and a whole country that is connected to each other on their own community-owned infrastructure and is plugged in to the backbone internet when the backbone internet is available, but you can remove that and you can still talk to each other. So in Christchurch after the earthquake, there was a couple of really awesome radio enthusiasts that set up these mesh networks, because when the internet went down, it was like, oh shit, how do we organise, how do we communicate, how do we tell people what we need and that sort of thing. And so they set up these little point-to-point mesh networks, so at least the people within that network could talk to each other. So there's a few projects actually starting out on that exact motivation, on this emergency relief thing. You say, look, internet's going to go down in some kind of emergency, so what we need is a community-owned, localized network that works without the internet, which is a really nice way to sneak in a quite subversive new technology. It's something I'm personally really interested in and under-resourced to look at more, but yeah, there are a lot of people exploring it. There's a thing called Serval project, S-E-R-V-A-L, which is an app for Android that allows you to call, text, send files, stream video to anyone else using that through Wi-Fi instead of through the cellnet. There's a thing called Tin Can, which has just been developed, which sends really small messages through Wi-Fi without talking to the cell phone or the internet networks. So people are playing with the idea, and I mean, I've got a $28 cell phone, right? But it's got a send and it's got a receive in it, and all of us have got one. And currently, it's got software on it that says you've got to talk to a central tower. But with the change of software, they could talk to each other, and we wouldn't have to pay for it, and no one could monitor it. It's just a matter of who's going to make the open cell phone so that we can put the open software on it to do that. But you know, the stakes are pretty high, and it's not that hard for someone to crack it. So we could be into some interesting times on that.
And I guess with a lot of developing countries, that's kind of like the best option for them as well, because they don't have the infrastructures of quite a traditional network.
Totally.
So,
And you don't have the resilience, you know, like internet only works because we've got such high, I don't know, like well-maintained systems, and we've got a decent cable from the top of the country to the bottom, you know, and people look after it. And if you've got patchy service, then your whole internet experience sucks. So they are starting to build. There's a great project called Brick, without the I, which is I don't know if you all have heard of Ushahidi, but it's this awesome open source project in Africa. They've just started this thing called Brick, which is it's like a battery and a wireless router that's super resilient. Like you could kick it and throw it underwater, and just making it really easy for anyone to provide connectivity for each other. Yeah, that's a really hard question, censorship, because my gut reaction is never censor everything, never censor anything at all. It's just open access, you know. And of course, in the harsh world of reality, that's a really dumb idea. And how you navigate that is really, really difficult. And that's what I'm talking about when I say this national conversation or international conversation is essentially, you know, what is our relationship to censorship? We've had some little taste of this in people using Lumio. So like we have one of our most active groups is a group over in Hungary that are using the tool. They're like a couple of hundred students that are organising protests against massive cuts to education funding in Hungary. And someone came along to one of their meetings and got access, you know, sort of like infiltrated the meeting and then got access to the Lumio group. And it turned out that they were a journalist working for the state media outlet. And so they took screenshots and quotes out of the conversations that people were having and put them on the newspaper and the 6 o'clock news to use them against the students, you know. And so then the next day we got a email from one of the coordinators of that group saying, look, we've got a pretty good idea of who this person might be. Can you look in the logs and confirm or deny it for us? And that put us in this really great dilemma of going, well, do we preserve the right of the individual to their privacy, or do we preserve the right of the group to their integrity? You know, and because we hadn't put a policy in place for that situation, our conclusion was, well, we're going to err on the side of the individual, even though politically, ideologically, we totally disagree with the guy, we think he's evil, and the group is awesome. We had to sort of go like, weigh that up and have really great conversations and come to the conclusion like, okay, we're going to just favour the individual on this one, but you can totally see how you could come up with a policy that favoured the group, that you might say, for that group, anyone's activity within that group is owned, the data is owned by the group, not by the individual. You could say that, you know, and a lot of universities, for instance, they'll say that when you're in the space and you're working, the things that you build are property of the university, or at least some kind of shared ownership thing. So we do have precedent of that in other spaces, but it's super messy, like, and there's no way that I've got the answer for it, and any individual one of us has got the answer for where to strike the line for censorship. Like, you know, is it? Do we want to stop people from having bad thoughts? You know, because that's what we're doing right now by arresting people based on their search queries. Personally, I think that's off the line a bit from where I'd like us to be, but we need to float these ideas together and come up with some kind of shared agreement that we can all work with. And we're not having anything remotely near that conversation right now. Like, I don't know if you'll notice a couple of, maybe like a month ago, 12 different National Party websites went down, and they talked about how they've been hacked by computer hackers. And it's, you know, most likely a couple of young kids that have downloaded a piece of software called Low Orbit Ion Cannon, LOIC. You can download it yourself very easily and use it very easily. And you put in your target website and you press go, and then it floods that target with requests and it shuts them down.
that DDoS?
Yeah, so that's a DDoS. It's the easiest thing in the world for anyone to do, and it's like one of the things that the internet does well, and it gets portrayed in the conversation as this like, you know, elite computer hackers have gone to this incredible lengths, and the masterminds have cracked in, and it's we need to put all these resources into protecting us from these people, when it's basically a kid pressing refresh over and over and over again. You know, like because we don't have this technical literacy in our society, that kind of shit flies. And the person's saying, hey, it's just a piece of software that anyone can use, you know. Let's think of a better solution to that problem rather than increasing our cybersecurity, you know, to protect against cyber terrorism. If we can't talk about it honestly, then yeah, I don't have high hopes for where our balance is going to land on that line.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty serious shift of, you know, the approach we take to this sort of stuff is in order, and like you said, God knows where to start.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, where to start is for us as privileged individuals that happen to get to go to university and live in a nice society and things, to explore the issues and get your head around them and develop your own opinion, and then throw your opinion at someone else, and you'll find that their opinion is slightly different, and then out of that, you know, you get some progress, you know, and you actually form an idea that's a little bit nuanced, and we could use that for the law instead of just some idiot talking about cyber threats, which is currently how we do it. Yeah. When I'm in a private room with two of my best friends, we talk in a certain way, and we exchange certain kinds of information. If I am in a room like this with a lot of people, and some of whom I don't know, and whose context I'm not really aware of, it changes what I say, because I'm conscious that I don't know everyone in the audience well enough to know how it's going to land with them. You know, I know that I could say something to my best friend that might be funny, but when I say it in a group, it's just really offensive, you know. And so in that sense, the public eye on me actually makes me a better person in a little way, because it means I'm more considerate. And so it actually encourages me to exercise more considerate behaviours. It's a lesson I learned in a really harsh way at Occupy. I'm not going to tell the whole story because it embarrasses me too much, but I got shut down for basically being really sexist. And it's the kind of thing that in a small group, no one would have shut me down for being sexist. It was like, oh, it's just, you know, we're just homies talking. But because I was in a room with people from different contexts, they're like, that's fucking sexist, man. And that was a really good experience, because it's made me go, oh, I should think about what I say, because it's going to have a different impact for the different people that hear it. So there is a positive aspect to living in public, you know, and I don't know if that positive outweighs the negative of having all your stuff snooped on, but I mean, there's certain social norms in space, in real space. There's certain behaviours that I wouldn't do right now, you know. There's quite a few that I wouldn't do, because there are social norms that say those things aren't going to be good for the room. And that's not bad, you know, like that's a good thing, that my behaviour is constrained to more or less be in the realm of what's constructive or funny or entertaining or, you know, whatever. And I'm not really upset that, you know, my autonomy has been limited, so that, you know, I can't take off my pants and run in a circle and feel good about that. Yeah. But yeah, in the same way, when you move into the online space, my behaviours are constrained. Like when I say I'm doing this experiment of living without privacy, that means every post I put on Facebook, I'm thinking, who's reading this? The internet is reading this. The government is reading this. My mum's reading this. Everyone's reading this. What am I saying? And that constrains my behaviours. And some of those constraints I think are positive. Some of them are really negative. And the most negative thing is the self-censorship, where I go, I have certain views that I'm not going to express. And I think when people are limiting their self-expression like that, that is limiting their humanity, and that's, yeah, quite worrying. And so in the Lumio context, one of the ways that we're hoping to, you know, we do spend a bit of time, because we're kind of egotistical and we think about how wouldn't it be great to have 1 billion users, we sort of think, you know, if we were to get to that point where we're as ubiquitous as Facebook, how do we prevent our thing from turning into that thing, you know. And the most obvious way that I can think of is to divorce the capital from it, you know. So the profit maximizing force that drives the direction of that thing, you can remove that. You know, we've removed it. So the way that we've set up as a co-op, if this thing generates any profit, it can only go to either back into the thing to make it work better, or out to other socially beneficial projects. It can't go to some person who happened to invest $1 million in the early days, and that's just it's just a legal form, you know. Like, it took us bloody ages to write this stuff, but we've got it in law now that we've got a constitution that guides the development of this project, and it will constrain our behaviours and sort of hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that have turned so many good ideas into, you know, platforms for delivering ads to people on the go, which is most of the web. So there's that side, and then there's also the human side, which is it's a really difficult project, but something we're committed to is being governed by our community, you know. So it's a work in progress. It's going to take a while, but you imagine if the people of Facebook got to decide what Facebook did and what Facebook's aims were for that year. They don't get to decide. It's the handful of people that happen to have hundreds of millions of dollars that get to decide. And that's why I say, you know, social media is society building. It's like, ideally in a good society, all the people get to decide where the society goes, you know? And it's a shitty system that's all messy and kind of crap, but it's better than just giving all the power, you know, to a few people with a lot of money. Which in New Zealand, you know, we're not quite at that point. We still have a little bit of democracy. So in Lumio land, we are really consciously trying to create a user-directed, you know, community. Where that comes up against the, you know, democracy and design have a very difficult relationship, you know. The iPhone wasn't designed by a committee, you know what I mean? Like, there's a couple of people that call themselves visionaries and they go out and they do it. So we're really learning how to navigate that tension between you want to delegate some authority to an individual and say, go, you're in charge, make this thing. But they also need to be directly in touch with all of the people that thing affects, and they need to take those perspectives into account all the time and respond to them. And there needs to be a channel for the person, you know, like when Facebook changes something, it affects me, it affects my life. I use the fucking thing every day, like it affects me. And there must be some way that I can say, this change has made my life worse. You've increased my suffering and I don't like it. There must be some channel for me to do that, but obviously they don't do that. So
you can email them.
You can email them if you can find an address, you know. They'll just point you to the FAQ. So yeah, it's part of the thing I said about, you know, how we're all babies here. Like we're so new to this. We're as a species, not as a Lumia. We're all working it out. I was in Christchurch a couple of weeks ago and seeing there's all these amazing ideas for things that could be done in the rebuild of Christchurch. All these creative, amazing projects, you know, and actually looking on the ground and seeing what things are really humming. And it's like apartment blocks, shopping centres, you know. The people that have a lot of money and a lot of experience with building stuff are ahead of the game. They've got lots of practice and they've got lots of resources behind them, and so they're the first off the mark and they're building all their shitty glass and steel boxes, you know. Meanwhile, all the really nice community-focused ideas take a lot longer because they've got bugger all resources and they've never done it before. They're all like figuring it out together. And I feel that way a little bit online, that there's a lot of these cool community projects, and meanwhile the Facebooks and the Googles just like straight past them because they've got practice and money and all the talent in the world behind them. But yeah, I don't know, it's like I'd much rather be working in this sort of sloppy community garden than in the apartment building, you know.
It's more fun, right?
Yeah. I'm just looking across the way at that apartment block, and my previous job while I was at uni, I was installing furniture in those shitty apartments, and I had to stop. It's just like, this is not a good space for a human to live in, you know, and I'm helping build the thing. And there comes a time where you've got to look at what impact you're having on people and go, do I want to, or do I not want to have this impact? And I couldn't do it. I had to stop. And it meant that I've been broke ever since, but I'm having a pretty good time. I'm conscious of the time on a Friday evening. It's kind of cider time.
What was the good positive note to end on, maybe? So thanks very much.
Thank you, folks. Please do join in the conversation and invite people. I don't have any idea really about what we could do with this space, but it's just an opportunity for us to share each other's ideas because we've heard a lot from me and not very much from everyone else. So, yeah.